Beelink SER6 Max was one of my favourite mini PCs of last year, but what if you cut some of its more premium features to create a mini with a lower price tag? The answer is the Beelink SER6. It's sub-premium. There's been a processor switcheroo with the SER6 line and a few other changes with this one. Some good, some not so good, and as always, you'll find out everything you need to know right after this message. EaseUS Partition Master Professional is a comprehensive storage partitioning app for your PC or server. Resize and extend partitions, clone OS drives, convert MBR to GPT, and even recover lost or broken partitions. Find out more in the video description. Beelink SER6 dumps the premium metal case for a premium plastic one. I'm impressed how solid and thick it is. Of course, I'd rather metal, but this is a good substitute. Design-wise, it's a mishmash of the SER5 and 6 Max. The metal mesh air inlet on both sides is large and allows airflow for both the top and bottom of the board. Beelink hasn't always had the nicest looking minis in previous years, but this one is a step up in the aesthetics department thanks to the simpler design, and it's only available in black. I also like the circle lit power button, a nice touch. So I did mention the SER6 has a different CPU to the one the Max launched with. Included in this one is the Ryzen 9 6900HX, an 8-core CPU with Radeon 680M graphics, while the SER6 Max launched with the slightly newer Ryzen 7 7735HS, which, despite the dogshit name, has similar specs. They're pretty close in performance, but the 6900HX edges it out in graphics, as you can see here. This is the biggest example I could find of around 10%. Of course, many minis struggle to keep the heat out of the box, and CPU or GPU performance, or both, can greatly suffer as a result. It all depends on whether the cooling is up to snuff, and that will be answered soon enough. But before someone jumps in the comments, yep, I did notice that Beelink switched the SER6 Max to the Ryzen 6900HX as well. I guess the chip is easier to get a hold of, or maybe it's cheaper. Whatever the case, I won't lose any sleep over it. Price-wise, the lowest SER6 I could find comes in at $500 for the 32GB RAM, 1TB SSD combo, and the SER6 Max is the same price on Amazon.com. Oh, I know which one I'd choose. I'm supposed to say this one, right? Almost all, if not every Beelink mini PC I've ever reviewed has had the same accessory kit, but not this one. There's only one HDMI cord instead of two, since there aren't two HDMI ports, and there's no monitor mount. Something I need to point out with the SER6 is the strange design of most of the USB ports. They're not as deep as other mini PCs or computers. What do I mean by that? Well, instead of going all the way in, there's a sizable chunk of USB connector showing. And I will avoid all dirty jokes in this serious matter. But does it matter? Well, functionally no, they still work the same, but the USB connections are more loose than on other minis and can be wiggled around. Pulling on them doesn't make them fall out easily, so it's fine, but I thought I'd mention it for those with OCD. I'm serious, I had someone in the comments complain that the SER6 Max had upside down USB ports, and another complaint that I called the mini SER instead of spelling out SER every freaking time. Yes, these people exist. Anyway, the only USB port that isn't affected by the lack of a deep hole is the USB-C on the back. So let's check out the ports. On the front is a BIOS reset button, USB 3, which I believe is 10GB but not specified, a Type-C 10GB data port, which doesn't support USB power delivery or display, an audio jack, and power button. The rear end consists of a Realtek 2.5GB LAN port, another USB 3, I suspect is 10GB, USB 2, HDMI 2.1, probably TMDS, again, not specified, 40GB USB 4, a second audio jack, and it's powered by a barrel jack power supply, which I prefer to the magnetic power plug introduced with the SER6 Max. Intel's AX200 chip provides Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth support. The USB 4 port does support power delivery, but you'll need to drop the wattage of the CPU in the BIOS and have enough juice to run it. My USB-C monitor only has 75 watts output, and you'll need 100 for the best result. Another thing that's changed is the bottom lid. which is now plastic instead of metal, like it was on most Beelink minis. It can be removed with 4 screws. The SER6 has a new fan bracket and SSD cooler. The fan cools the memory, while the heatsink takes care of the dual M.2 Gen 4 NVMe slots. This bracket is made of metal and is much improved over the previous effort found in the Max. Another 4 screws to remove it. Watch out for the fan cable, and there are 2 thermal pads included for the NVMe drives, which isn't common. Usually you only get one for the included storage drive. The 500GB NVMe is a crucial P3+, and underneath it is the M.2 AX200 Wi-Fi card. DDR5 5600 is included, but as the stickers say, the slots are running at 4800. I confirmed this in Windows and looked in the BIOS, but there is no option for changing memory speed, even though the HX should support memory overclocking. At least the first minis I reviewed did. This screen showing the memory stats is all I could find. Yep, I know the 6900HX only supports DDR5 4800 natively, and that going higher technically falls into the realm of overclocking, but I would still like the option in the BIOS for those of us who like to live dangerously by making our minis crash when they're pushed too far. I was hoping to do a like-for-like comparison against the Radeon 780M graphics found in the latest chips at 5600 to see the actual performance increase gen on gen, but we're stuck at 4800. The SER6 comes pre-installed with Windows 11 Pro and it has been modified. Initial setup has been drastically cut down to a few regional settings, and most apps were missing on my unit. Even the Windows Store and Notepad. Clicking them starts a download of the app. Don't ask me why it isn't just a regular Windows install. Plenty of installations on minis are modified in some way, like phone manufacturers do with Android. Anyway, as I've been doing lately, I scanned the drive with Defender and Malwarebytes. It came up clean. Ubuntu off a USB drive works fine. No problems with networking or audio. Since I don't have the SER6 Max with the same and current CPU, I'm going to compare what I do have. Beelink SER6 is the fastest 6900HX I've tested, and even edged out the 7735HS found in the Max slightly. In multicore, again, the fastest 6900HX and almost the same as the Max. However, it is a few percent behind in video encoding. The graphics benchmark doesn't show much difference either. Less than 2% improvement in DX11 for the SER6 and 2% in DX12. The crucial P3 Plus is a Gen 4 drive, and the 500GB model included with mine has surprisingly low sequential write speeds, around 900 megabytes a second. That's it. The same drive on the SER6 Max had much better results. I'm not sure what's going on here. The read is still Gen 4 speed, so reaching the Gen 3 write of around 1900 megabytes a second shouldn't be a problem. I don't get it. Alright, let's take a look at some games. Since the Max now has the same CPU, I can't do a proper comparison side by side. So I'll just show this mini's gaming performance as standalone. Forza Ryzen 5 is one of those AAA games that doesn't require as much graphics horsepower as other titles. With around 100 frames per second, you've got some headroom to increase graphics detail and get around the 60 FPS mark. So let's contrast that with the recently released RoboCop Rogue City. The frame rate has dropped to almost a third, and that's with AMD's FSR2 image upscaling in balance mode. Forget native resolution. An almost 10-year-old game like Grand Theft Auto 5 holds up pretty well at 1080p. While another recent release like Tekken 8 also can't hit full speed at 1080p native resolution without image upscaling. This game has to run at 60 FPS as the game speed is tied to the frame rate. With the esports titles, it's all about frames, but even at very high detail settings, League of Legends provides plenty.
Carve a path.
but it's best to stick to low settings for Counter-Strike 2 if you want to stay above 100 FPS. Same deal with Dota 2.
Where'd that funny light come from? Guess we better.
And Valorant will give you 200 FPS plus most of the time.
I have the spike.
I really look forward to the day when these minis play Breath of the Wild at 60 FPS, as it is the toughest Wii U game to emulate and will mean the whole library will play fine at 1080p, which is much better than the Wii U did. The PlayStation 3 library varies greatly in performance requirements. I like to use Wipeout, as its frame rate can be unlocked and represents the performance you can expect in quite a lot of games. As I get familiar with the Xbox 360 emulator, Xenia Canary, I'll add something new. This time, it's an unlocked frame rate. Forza Ryzen doesn't quite reach 60 FPS on this CPU. On the Xbox 360, this game was running at 30 FPS 720p.
In 400 yards, turn right.
AMD's Radeon 680M graphics was a massive boost over the previous generation integrated graphics, but time has passed and the latest games require more grunt than ever. Thanks to image upscaling, you can still get away with playing the latest games at 1080p low. But for how long? Hard to tell. One thing you can do is supercharge the mini PC with an eGPU enclosure using the USB 4 port. My Razer Core X with an RTX 3070 allows 4K gaming with image upscaling. The RTX 3070 is also starting to age. While AMD chips don't have the same level of hardware video decoding performance like Intel's QuickSync, the 6900HX can handle my 4K video editing project in Adobe Premiere okay. It's reasonably responsive scrubbing across the timeline. The BIOS has auto power on and wake on LAN options if you need those. You can also drop the power limit to reduce power draw, heat, performance, and fan noise. There are even more advanced power limiting options if you want to mess around with those. Idle power draw at 9 watts is around what's expected. Maximum power draw of 103 is a bit higher than the SER6 Max or SER7, but not a big deal. The CPU managed to stay under 90C, which is good. The fan noise under load is on the higher side. Noise levels are similar to the Beelink SER6 Max. Crucial's P3 Plus definitely wasn't thermal throttling during the benchmark. At 56C, it was kept cool. Okay, so what I like about the SER6 is the new and improved memory and SSD cooling bracket. Performance-wise, this is the best 6900HX I've tested. Dual 2280 Gen 4 M.2 slots aren't common, and they're great to see here. The SER6 is one of the nicer looking Beelink minis around. What I don't like is the lack of a memory overclocking option in the BIOS. The write speed of my Crucial P3 Plus drive is half of what it should be. Not sure what the problem is, it could be the drive. Further testing is required, but my time is limited. Beelink SER6 Mini PC has a segmentation problem, at least on Amazon.com. It's priced the same as a more premium Max model. In other regions, this might not be a problem. Still, there's been a bunch of cuts in features over the Max, and the price could have been more attractive. The Beelink SER6 is kinda noisy under load. There are other smaller oddities like the shallow USB ports and the Windows install missing apps, which need to be downloaded. Overall, the Beelink SER6 is a good mini PC. It has great performance and is cooled on both sides of the board. Fan noise could always be lower, but we won't see that until mini PC manufacturers ditch Intel's 4x4-inch design and start using bigger fans. Sort of like this mini PC right here, which was really quiet. Cheers!